There are moments in history when the world seems to hold its breath, when the fate of empires turns not on a clash of swords, but on a whisper from the heavens. Rome, the eternal city of gods and conquerors, once bowed only to power and blood. But then one man looked to the sky and saw a symbol that would change everything. In that single vision, the course of civilization bent, from the altars of Jupiter to the shadow of the cross. The old gods of Rome demanded sacrifice, not salvation. Their temples glimmered with gold, their altars reeked of blood. The people prayed, but their prayers vanished into smoke, swallowed by the cold silence of the heavens. The empire had conquered the world, it could not conquer its own soul. In the marketplaces, statues of Jupiter and Mars towered over the people, but in their eyes flickered doubt, a quiet yearning for something beyond the reach of empire and sword. Rome had grown weary of its own greatness. Centuries of conquest had left it drowning in wealth, but starving for meaning or death. The emperors, one after another, had claimed divinity, but none could offer hope. Each sought to carve his name into stone, but time erases all things written in pride. Beneath the iron discipline of the legions, whispers of a forbidden faith began to stir. A faith that promised not victory, but peace. A faith born in humility, not in power. And yet, for the mighty empire, such ideas were treason. Christians were hunted, imprisoned, burned, their faith tested by flame and the sword. To worship a crucified man was to defy Caesar himself, and still they endured. Their voices, faint but unyielding, echoed through catacombs beneath the earth, where they sang by candlelight, waiting for the dawn that never came. The empire could break their bodies, but not their spirits. And in the silence of their suffering, something began to move, slowly, invisibly, like a tide beneath the moon. By the time a new emperor rose from the ashes of civil war, Rome was a world divided. Pagan altars still smoked, but the old fire was fading. The empire had grown too vast to control, too weary to fear. Rebellion brewed not only in the provinces, but in the soul of its people. They wanted more than gods carved from stone. They wanted purpose. In the shadows of the Palatine Hill, the new emperor could feel it, the tremor of change beneath his feet. He had been raised in the old ways, hardened by war, sculpted by ambition. Yet even he could sense that the empire he had inherited was reaching its twilight. The gods of old had grown silent, and Rome itself, once a city of divine certainties, now stood at the edge of something unseen. The world he ruled was magnificent and decaying all at once, like a golden statue cracking beneath its own weight. The Senate still whispered of Jupiter's favor. Priests still sacrificed bulls in the name of Mars, but their rituals no longer stirred the hearts of men. The empire had power without faith, laws without mercy, wealth without purpose. And when a man leads such a world, he cannot help but wonder, what comes after the glory fades? It was in this world, doubt and splendor, of triumph and ruin, that destiny began to stir. Not through the sword of conquest, but through the stirring of conscience. The emperor who would one day see the cross in the sky first had to walk through the fire of his own disbelief. He did not know it yet, but his reign would not be remembered for the battles he won. It would be remembered for the faith he found. Because in the heart of a dying empire, there was still one truth that refused to die, that the greatest power on earth is not found in armies nor in empires, but in a soul's quiet search for something eternal. And soon, Rome would find it. The night before destiny is always silent. The wind stills. The stars seem to hold their breath. And somewhere beneath the vast and watching heavens, a man stands alone, not as an emperor, but as a soul about to be judged by eternity. The empire was divided, tearing itself apart from within. Brother fought brother, generals turned on their own legions, and Rome's once unbreakable order crumbled under the weight of ambition. In the chaos, one man rose, a soldier of iron will and relentless vision. He had seen the empire's heart, bleeding, fractured, faithless, and he swore to restore it. His name would echo through the ages. But even emperors bleed doubt. As the sun sank on the eve of battle, the fate of Rome balanced on a knife's edge. The Tiber River glimmered like liquid gold beneath the dying light, and across its waters waited an army. Vast, disciplined, and merciless. The emperor's soldiers whispered prayers to forgotten gods, their armor reflecting the last colors of the sunset. The air was heavy, thick with fear and the scent of fate. That night, the emperor did not sleep. He stood upon the ramparts, gazing into the dark horizon, wrestling with the ghosts of Rome's past and the silence of his gods. For years, he had fought in their name. He had offered them blood, victory, and devotion. Yet tonight he felt nothing, only the weight of the world pressing upon his shoulders. Then, as dawn began to bleed across the sky, it happened. In the heavens above, a light began to stir, faint at first and fierce blind. The soldiers shielded their eyes, thinking it was the sun breaking through the clouds. But it was not the sun. It was a sign. Across the burning sky, a cross of fire took shape. Radiant, unearthly, shimmering with power no mortal could command. And beneath it, words seemed to whisper through the air, ancient and eternal. In this sign conquered, the emperor fell to his knees. The battlefield, the crown, the empire, all of it seemed to fade before that vision. For the first time in his life, he felt small, mortal. But in that smallness, he felt something greater, presence that reached beyond Rome, beyond kings, beyond time itself. When dawn broke in full, he rose a changed man. No longer did he march under the banners of Jupiter or Mars. Instead, he carried the sign he had seen, the cross emblazoned upon the shields of his legions. His soldiers, uncertain yet obedient, marched under this new symbol, not knowing they were carrying the future of the world upon their backs. And when battle came, the river turned red, but not with the blood of defeat. Against all odds, his army triumphed. The enemy broke. Their standards fell, and Rome, battered, divided Rome, bowed once more to a single emperor. But this victory was unlike any before. It was not just a conquest of men, it was a conquest of spirit. The emperor emerged from that battle not only as ruler of Rome, but as the first witness to a faith that would outlive the empire itself. The vision he had seen upon the clouds became the torch that would light the centuries. He did not yet know the name of the power that had saved him, but he knew this. The old gods had fallen silent, and a new voice had spoken. A voice that would reshape not only the empire he ruled, but the very soul of the world. And from that day on, Rome would never look at the sky the same way again. Empires are not reborn in the roar of battle, but in the quiet moments that follow. After the dust settles, after the swords have fallen still, that is when destiny whispers its truest words. The battle was won. The emperor who once bowed before the gods of stone now walked with the weight of revelation. The vision of the cross still burned behind his eyes as if branded by light itself. And from that fire within him, a new idea began to take shape, one that would echo through eternity. For centuries, Rome had known only one truth. To rule was to command, and to command was to be obeyed. Faith had always been a matter of power, decreed by emperors, enforced by legions. The gods of Rome demanded loyalty, not love. But the man who now ruled its world had seen something beyond power, a kingdom not of marble, but of mercy. He had looked into the heavens and seen that faith could not be conquered by flame or steel. For every Christian Rome had thrown to the lions, 100 more rose in defiance, praying for those who condemned them. No army could defeat a belief that was willing to die rather than hate. And so in a moment of courage, rare even among kings, the emperor chose not to destroy his enemies, but to free them. It was the year 313. The decree was simple, yet divine in its defiance of the old world. It would come to be known as the Edict of Milan. And with it, centuries of bloodshed came to an end. No longer would faith be chained by the state. No longer would men and women hide in shadows, whispering prayers in fear. The empire that had once hunted believers now offered them protection. Temples of persecution became sanctuaries of worship. The same Rome that had crucified a carpenter's son now opened its gates to his followers. For the first time in history, the empire bowed to something higher than itself. Imagine it, the echo of the emperor's words spreading across the provinces. Let every man worship as his soul desired. To the pagans, it was unthinkable. To the persecuted, it was a miracle. To history, it was the dawn of a new age. Through the streets of Constantinople and Rome, fires were lit, not for sacrifice, but for celebration. The sound of hammers building temples was replaced by the toll of church bells. The faith once buried beneath the catacombs now rose into the sunlight. But beneath the glory there was resistance. The Senate grumbled in secret. The high priests of the old gods whispered of betrayal. They called it weakness. The emperors turned toward compassion. But he did not waver. He had seen what they could not, that an empire ruled by fear was doomed to fall, while one ruled by conscience might yet endure. And so, with ink and conviction, he wrote a new chapter in the book of mankind. The Edict of Milan was not just a law, it was liberation. It was a bridge between worlds, between the Rome that had been and the Rome that would come. between the empire of men and the kingdom of the spirit. From that moment on, Christianity was no longer a whisper in the dark. It became a voice that sang from the heart of the empire itself, a faith carried not by slaves or martyrs alone, but by the Emperor of Rome. And for the first time in history, the sword of Caesar bowed before the cross. Change does not come in an instant. It seeps into the stones of a city, into the hearts of men, until one day the old world wakes and finds itself reborn. Rome, the city of gods, the heart of empire, had long been a monument to earthly glory. Its marble arches told tales of conquest. Its arenas thundered with the cries of the condemned. Its emperors were worshipped as divine. Yet beneath the glitter of triumph, the old gods were dying. Their temples stood tall, but their power had faded into ritual and dust. The new emperor had seen the light above the battlefield. He had felt the quiet presence that no statue could contain. Now, he sought to build not just a kingdom of men, but a kingdom of faith, one that would unite the broken pieces of a weary world. And so began the transformation of Rome. Slowly, deliberately, like dawn spreading across the ruins of night, the temples once built for Jupiter and Apollo began to fall silent. In their place, churches rose, humble at first, then magnificent, reaching toward heaven with a power no empire could command. The basilicas glowed with candlelight, their walls echoing with hymns instead of war cries. The same hands that once raised swords now clasped in prayer. The same empire that had celebrated conquest now began to celebrate compassion. From the eastern provinces to the heart of the capital, crosses began to gleam where eagles once stood. The emperor commissioned the building of churches across the empire, none greater than one upon a hill called Golgotha. There, upon the ground where a man had been crucified, rose a temple unlike any Rome had ever seen, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It was not merely architecture, it was faith given form, stone and spirit intertwined. And yet the change was not without struggle. The old guard clung to their traditions, to their gods of thunder and war. Senators sneered, generals murmured of weakness. Rome, they said, and was built by blood, not by mercy. But the emperor knew better. He had seen what blood alone could build and how quickly it could wash away. He envisioned an empire where the sword served justice, not ambition, where law walked hand in hand with faith, where rulers governed not as gods among men, but as men answerable to God. Slowly the empire began to breathe again, differently, deeply. The festivals of cruelty faded, replaced by rituals of compassion, gladiatorial games. That brutal theater of death began to wane under his rule. The cross, once a symbol of execution, became a symbol of hope. And through it all, the emperor stood as the bridge between two worlds, the last son of the pagan gods and the first emperor of a Christian age. His mother, Helena, journeyed across distant lands to seek the sacred relics of her new faith. Legends say she found the very cross upon which the Savior had hung. To the people of Rome, it was a sign, a living thread between history and heaven. The empire's heart had turned. From this turning point, Europe would be forever changed. The art, the laws, the very soul of civilization began to bear the mark of the cross. Empires would rise and fall in its shadow. Kings would swear their crowns upon it. And through it all, the memory of the emperor who first raised it over Rome would endure. He had not merely converted a city. He had baptized history itself. And so, from the ashes of empire, faith took its throne. Not in marble, not in gold, but in the hearts of men. Centuries pass, empires fall, and yet some names refuse to fade. They echo through marble halls and church bells, through the breath of prayers whispered in the dark. Because some men do not merely rule history, they rewrite its soul. Long after his crown had turned to dust, the emperor's shadow still stretched across time. His was not the legacy of a conqueror, but of a bridge between two worlds, two faiths, two destinies. He had inherited a Rome forged in blood and left behind a Rome bound by belief. In the centuries that followed, the city of Caesar became the city of Christ, where legions once marched, pilgrims now walked, where arenas once drowned in cries of death, choirs now rose in hymns of life. The world he left behind was not perfect. No empire ever is, but it was transformed. And that transformation outlived marble, iron, and crown. The emperor's name became a symbol of awakening, Constantine. The man who saw the cross in the sky and believed it was more than light, it was destiny. Through him, faith and power found each other, and neither would ever be the same. From his vision was born a civilization that would shape the very core of the Western world. Art took breath from his face. Michelangelo's brush, Raphael's vision, Dante's words, all tracing their lineage back to the moment when one man chose light over empire. Law itself changed its heartbeat. Compassion began to weigh alongside judgment. The sword, once raised to conquer, now knelt before the altar. And though time would one day crumble the empire he ruled, the idea he unleashed could not be destroyed. For ideas, unlike kingdoms, cannot be conquered. The empire of Rome would fall, but the faith of Rome, that would endure through every storm, every dark age, every fire that tried to silence it. From the cathedrals of Europe to the corners of the earth, his decision rippled outward like light breaking across the horizon. Even those who never knew his name lived in the world his choice created. Because when Constantine saw that cross in the sky, he did more than win a battle. He changed the very meaning of victory. He taught the world that faith could stand beside power without bowing to it. That mercy could walk with might and not be devoured. That an empire, no matter how vast, is nothing if it cannot see beyond itself. And perhaps that is why, even now, his story endures. Not just in scripture or stone, but in the fragile hope that one vision, one choice can still change everything. Qazi, for the man who once ruled Rome, did not just reshape his empire. He reshaped eternity, and as the centuries whisper his name, history remembers. Not the soldier, not the emperor, but the soul who turned an empire toward heaven.